the final topic I wanted to cover regarding Joe Biden here is actually a pretty funny one, because it's kind of, so it's Joe Biden just, again, making a fool of himself and just saying some stupid shit. But it's also the fact that Democrats do not learn from the past at all. To be honest, a lot of politicians don't learn from the past, or they just don't care. They know what happened in the past, and they just ignore what happened in the past, and they just kind of ignore it and just go on with whatever they're doing, going on with the same shitty policies anyway. But the former Vice President Joe Biden was I don't know, he was some sort of, I think it was like a coffee shop or something. He was making, let me just check this here real quick. Apparently he was in New Hampshire, I believe. Okay, so I'm gonna play a clip for you guys in a second that will talk about how it's gonna show Joe Biden making a comment while he was in New Hampshire, and he, I don't know, had some fucking something stupid to say here. So I just thought I would show it to you guys here, and then I'll get on to reading about the article. So the article kind of addressing his comments. So here's a video of Joe Biden commenting on Republicans and how he feels he's going to be able to work with them if he were to become, president. If he were to get in, he were to get into the White House and, become obviously President Joe Biden. So let's see what. So this is actually a segment from MSNBC's Morning Joe. So let me play this clip for you guys real quick, and then we will discuss it on the other side and also read the CNN article about the comments that he made. Check it out.
Well, campaigning in New Hampshire, former Vice President Joe Biden said he believes Republicans will find their way back to working across the aisle after President Trump is out of office.
I just think there is a way, and the thing will fundamentally change things, is with Donald Trump out of the White House. Not a joke. You will see an epiphany occur among many of my Republican friends. And it's already beginning this year in the House now. You've seen people that, in fact, were not willing to vote for any Democratic initiative, even if they agreed with it, because they didn't want to be the odd person out if it wasn't going to pass. There's no sense in getting politically beaten for something that's not going to happen. Let me put it another way. If we can't change it, we're in trouble. This nation cannot function without generating consensus.
Wow. So much there that I'm glad he said. But Joe, is it possible the fever will break? Because a lot of these Republicans have put a lot of core values, have crossed them, really, in order to stay with Trump. Will it go away?
It can. It certainly can. And it's interesting that talking about consensus, talking about bipartisanship, sounds like a radical message. That's how bad things have gotten in 2019. But Willie, if you get somebody who knows how Washington works, let's Bill Clinton, for instance. Bill Clinton was forced to support a lot of Republican initiatives that Bill Clinton didn't like because they were very popular. Everybody talked about the contract on America. Well, with contract with America, a lot of times we get a majority of Democrats voting for it because the way the issue was framed, they had no choice. Bill Clinton, after that, spent the rest of his term coming up with plans that Republicans could work with as well, because he had governed for a very long time, and he also knew Washington, D.C. We've had people in the White House that haven't known how Washington works over the past 15, 20 years. And I think somebody like Biden actually has the ability to get things working in D.C. again. And I loved what he said at the end, which was, we have no choice. We're in trouble if we can't start working together again, Republicans and Democrats alike. That's a hopeful message. Americans want compromise. Americans want both sides talking with each other and working with each other. And that's Biden's message.
Okay, so hold on. Okay, so let me just comment on that real quick. So this is your typical establishment show here, Morning Joe, on MSNBC, which pushes that idea of how everybody has to work together, everybody has to come together, everybody has to compromise for the betterment of the country. This is a ridiculously false narrative. It's not, that's not what these, so people hear that and they're like, yeah, that's actually not a bad idea, right? Everybody has to work together. Everybody has to work together and come together for the betterment of the country because all these radical positions are not working. Okay, so, I mean, obviously that radical part of the radical, the radical part is stupid. But when it comes to these people that are talking about the idea of compromise and how wonderful it is, and Joe Scarborough is saying it's a dirty word, or it's like, it seems like a radical thing to say. No, nobody is saying that compromise is like off the table and it shouldn't be done. We're talking about the fact that when it comes to compromising, what we do is a lot of times we end up giving away a lot of the stuff that people already support. So for example, to just use one thing as an example that I've used many times, is the fact that both parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, are in favor of entitlement cuts. And they've, when President Obama was president, he was pushing constantly. He was constantly pushing for, putting in, possibly cutting entitlements. If he wasn't pushing it, he was definitely like discussing the issue, and he was using the same GOP kind of right-wing framing of like, well, we need to save Social Security and Medicare. We need to save these programs before they go bankrupt because we want to keep them in existence, and we can't have them going away anywhere. We can't have them going away and not have any more of it, which is just that's also another bullshit narrative. But that's just one issue where people. So when it comes to doing that, that's just ridiculous. I mean, cutting entitlements, cutting Social Security and Medicare is just an absurd idea, and it's only more of a way for the super rich to get more cutbacks. So for example, what you do is let's say if you cut Social Security and Medicare, and then you what they claim is what the politicians like to claim, like, oh, we're gonna save it for the the betterment of the future. No, what they're doing is they're cutting those government programs, so taking money out of those government programs, out of those entitlement programs, and they're going to give it more. They're going to shift it into more tax cuts for the rich. That's their whole plan. That's the whole plan behind the kind of the establishment and certainly the Republican narrative for sure, and what Democrats a lot of times give into, which is just kind of like a so-called compromise of the establishment. In reality, it's not compromise. Again, it's not compromise. This is an issue which involves screwing over the American people, screwing over regular people who are getting, honestly, when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, getting the bare minimum when it comes to benefits. You're getting enough just to stay alive. And these are very popular programs. So when they're cutting them because they are popular. The government, the politicians, the establishment is cutting them because it's benefiting Republicans. It's benefiting regular people, whether it is Republicans or Democrats. Republicans and both Democrats love Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, all that stuff. They love these entitlement programs because it keeps them alive, especially the older people. Which is why a lot of people in the progressive community, like myself, were pushing for Medicare for All, because Medicare is a very popular program, and it's a government program, and we want it to expand to all people. That's a different topic for another day, and we've obviously talked about that a lot, and we might talk about that later on in the show today. But to stick to my point, when it comes to the whole idea of compromise and working together, that's done to screw over regular people. That's all it is. So when Joe Scarborough on his, establishment show on MSNBC, the so-called liberal network, when he talks about this kind of stuff, he's just talking about stuff that's going to screw over people. And then Joe Biden talking about how, actually, you know what? I'm going to get to that in a second. So I'll get to the epiphany, the stupid epiphany point in a second when it comes to what Biden said. So let's just continue on with the rest of the segment here.
Yeah, and Biden was criticized by many progressives for saying that. Some people thinking he sounded naive in the age of Trump, thinking that all these Republicans who pledged fealty to the President of the United States over the last couple of years might actually come back and work together with Democrats someday. But if that's not possible, what are we doing here? And I think that's sort of the point that Joe Biden was trying to make. And as you say, he's been doing it for 36 years or so in the United States Senate and then as vice president.
So did you notice how they scoffed at the fact that progressives, oh dear God. I mean, these people, they're so out of touch with regular people in this country. These establishment hosts, pundits, like they sneer, they scoff at, like, oh my God, progressives not being in favor of compromise. How dare you? Like, yeah, what we're pissed off about is that we can't stand the fact that Joe Biden wants to. I'll just get into the epiphany point right now. So the whole fact that Joe Biden is talking about how Republicans are going to have an epiphany, and all of a sudden the clouds are going to open up, the sun is going to shine through. All the Republicans are going to realize that this world is wonderful with Joe Biden as president, and Donald Trump is gone, and they're just going to suddenly want to work with Democrats, and everybody is just going to get along. It's going to be kumbaya. That is complete bullshit. Nobody fucking believes that. If you have a fucking brain, you have one remaining brain cell in your head, there's no way you believe that. I mean, even Republicans, even the right-wing conservatives and the Trump supporters, not even they'll be like, yeah, Joe Biden, totally right. We're totally going to work with him, and we're going to want to be on his side, and we're going to want to do what he's doing. We're going to listen to Joe Biden because he's totally got a lot of great things to say. These are the same people that hated Barack Obama and wanted to do again. They want to oppose everything Barack Obama did. They filibustered. I'm sorry. They pushed for. They filibustered. So every single thing, like piece of legislation that Barack Obama wanted to do, the Senate wouldn't. The Senate, well, not so much the Congress, but when it came to the Senate, they couldn't get anything passed because they didn't want to allow anything to get passed. When it came to any kind of even remotely liberal or progressive piece of legislation that Barack Obama or anybody in the Senate was pushing for, Mitch McConnell just said, fuck you, we're not going to push for that because we're Republicans and we oppose everything this Democrat's going to say. But all of a sudden, because Joe Biden is gonna become president, he's going to change things. He was the vice president under Barack Obama. So why would all of a sudden he becomes president and Republicans, because they hate Trump, I guess, they're going to all of a sudden be on Joe Biden's side? This was the party that tried to repeal Obamacare over 65 times, more than 60 times for sure. And all of a sudden they're going to realize that they want to work with Joe Biden? I mean, come on, man. There's no way Joe Biden can. I mean, either he's stupid or he's just blowing smoke. He's just saying something just to say it, just to get people on his side and pretend like, yeah, Republicans, me and the Republican Party, we can totally be best buddies and work together for making this country great. No, that's not true. We need to get rid of assholes like you, Joe Biden, and we need to get rid of those right-wing Republicans who want to destroy this country. Not that Joe Scarborough or Mika Brzezinski gives a fuck about that. Those assholes with their fucking, cushy jobs, making however many millions of dollars they're making every fucking, year, they don't give a shit about what you or me or anybody else in this country is going through. They don't give a shit about the people that are going to lose their Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, if they're going to get screwed over by Wall Street, if the economy is going to crash and they're going to be left on the fucking street. They don't give a fuck about that. They just want their best friend, their buddies in the establishment to have a better life because they're in the establishment. So they're in the establishment. They want everybody else in the establishment with them to get the same fucking benefits they're getting. So let's continue the clip here.
Amna, you were in Iowa last week talking to voters. It's 9 months out from those caucuses. I understand you interviewed Castro and O'Rourke, two candidates obviously running to become president. But what did you find as you talked to voters more broadly about what exactly they're looking for? Are they thinking about Donald Trump? Are they thinking about who can beat him? Or do they have specific issues that they want to sort of check boxes with each candidate? Or are they just sort of still testing the waters?
It's really interesting because the head of the Iowa Democratic Party there basically said, look, we stopped trying to keep up with all the candidates coming through. Like, if we hear about them coming through and we can act like the welcome wagon, great. But the pace of candidates coming through Iowa is already working. It's such a clip. And the voters there that we talked to, who, by the way, consisted of also, self-identified Democrats, but also Republicans and independents who said that they would be open to voting for a Democrat this time, caucusing for a Democrat in the caucuses, and potentially even voting down the line in a general election because they've become unhappy with the Republican Party so far. There are a few things they're looking for at this stage, right? And you know as well as I do, Iowa voters take themselves very seriously. Their responsibility is that first nominating contest. So they ask a lot of very specific questions that run the gamut. Healthcare, campaign finance, national security, immigration. I saw both O'Rourke and Castro at work in action, taking questions across all of those issues. But the number one thing that all the voters I talked to said that they want to see among the Democratic presidential candidates right now is civility. They said lessons learned from 2016. We want to see these guys talk about the issues. We want to see them talk about what they would do if they were elected. At the same time, there's a tension there because the next thing that they say they want to see in someone they could support is someone who could beat Donald Trump. And so those two things are going to have to come into conflict at some point. Right now, they're just kind of kicking the tires and seeing where everyone stands.
All right. So, largely that last part was pretty lame. I didn't really even have to play that. I just wanted to see what the rest of that segment was going to be. But the one part about how, largely the part about talking about Iowa caucus voters and stuff, oh yeah, there's Republicans that are going to be in favor of voting for the Democratic candidate. That's the same exact thing that was being talked about in 2016. A lot of people a lot of the media and shit, a lot of the Hillary supporters were like, yeah, totally. The people that the never Trumpers, the people that don't like Donald Trump, they're totally going to be in favor of Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton is civil. She's so nice. She smiles all the time and she's not yelling and screaming. Okay. So if you want to make that argument regarding Trump being a prick and he's an asshole and he yells a lot and he calls people names, okay, fine. I understand people how that might turn people off. But when it comes to the general idea of being angry, there's nothing wrong with being angry and being a politician. And again, the one person that shows that anger, but also shows a lot of passion is Bernie Sanders. When it comes to somebody that captures the essence of why people in this country are angry, it's Bernie Sanders. It's somebody that understands that, listen, man, people in this country are getting fucked over. We're getting screwed. Whether it's the income inequality gap being fucking widened like the Red Sea, whether it's, people being, 45,000 people, dying from, lack of decent health care, essentially, from, people making not slave wages, but basically, you're making shitty wages, essentially. You have to work, 2, 3, 4 jobs sometimes just to make ends meet, just to keep the lights on. So Bernie Sanders understands these issues. He understands that these things are happening. He points these things out. So listen, it's not going over the head. But what Bernie Sanders says is not going over the head of Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski and all these pundits on CNN and MSNBC and all that stuff. These people know what Bernie Sanders is saying, but in their mind, they don't relate to that. They don't relate to that point of view, that lifestyle of living that shitty lifestyle. So to them, it's like, well, you're mentioning all these things that I'm sorry, it doesn't compute. In my fucking brain full of rocks, and this my head full of rocks, it doesn't compute. I haven't gone through situations where I've been in poverty. I haven't gone through situations where I've had to work multiple jobs. Like I said before, These people work cushy jobs. They make millions of dollars. They go in front of a fucking teleprompter and just repeat a bunch of bullshit while the rest of them just repeat talking points from whatever, politicians or parties they're part of, politicians they love or parties they're part of. Or whatever lobbying group or whatever the hell they're part of, network, their channel they're part of. So whatever talking points or narrative they have to push, they push that. That's their job. The rest of us have to go out there. I have to go do a podcast. All the people that a bunch of people that I know in the progressive community, they have to go do podcasts. They have to make a living off this shit. Everybody else has to go work in a McDonald's. They have to go work at a clothing store. They have to go, they got to go work in retail. They have to go, they have to go to school so that they can get a better education. I have a friend that's currently putting herself through a master's program so that she can get into the field of psychology, because she knows that a bachelor's degree can't do it. Now I have a bachelor's degree, but I'm having trouble finding a job myself. And I can't really, I don't see anything else that I'm passionate about other than this. So talking to you guys, talking to camera, 3 different cameras right now, I enjoy this shit a hell of a lot more than I do going and working for some asshole that's going to be yelling at me and telling me what to do all the time. Sorry, that's just not what I like to do. But my point is that because of the kind of country that we're living in and the kind of policies that are passed by different corrupt politicians, we're forced to do these kind of things that, conventionally, it's not a conventional thing to go and do a podcast. But if you're passionate about it, that's great. You go and do it. The conventional thing is, you got to go and get a 9 to 5. Now, that's not something I want to do. But if you have to make ends meet, you have to do one or the other. So if you're good at going and talking in front of a camera and doing a podcast and making money off of it and all that stuff, which is what I'm trying to do, then I'm going to do it. If I want to go and work, maybe I want to go do this and also do a side job on the side, then that's another thing I can do. So there's different alternatives. But my general point is that it's not. So you can go talk to all the Iowa caucus voters you want, but those people are not representative of the entire country, let alone the fact that you're going to talk to some people that are going to be outraged by some, cursing from Donald Trump or from anger from Bernie Sanders or whatever. So, what as if Joe Biden has never gotten angry before? So, if people think that Joe Biden is going to be the answer because maybe he doesn't sound as angry, I don't know. But that doesn't, when I showed you the clip before of him, talking so loud and yelling and shit when he was in that Rotary Club and was talking about immigration, he sounded pretty angry there. So there's nothing wrong with sounding angry. Joe Biden wants to sound angry, he can sound angry for all I care. That doesn't matter to me. I could care less how much he yells. But the overall point is that you have to focus on the policies. What are the policies that these politicians are pushing for? What are the things that they are focusing on? If they are going out there and pushing for things that are going to screw over regular people, I can't support that. Why would I? I'm a progressive. I'm a populist. I support policies that help regular people. If I'm going to go support, compromising with Democrats, compromising and working with each other to screw over regular people, and again, it's not actual compromising. If it's being done just to screw over regular people, but it's being portrayed as compromising, then I don't support that. So fuck you and fuck off, and anything that you want to do that's going to be doing the same shit that we've already seen, then I'm just not in favor of that. Sorry, that's not something I can back. So just to kind of go over again with what so the whole kind of epiphany comment with Joe Biden, it says, so the article here says Joe Biden predicts a post-Trump epiphany for Republicans, just as you saw in the statement that he made in that segment I just played. It says, former Vice President Joe Biden predicted Tuesday that Republicans will have an epiphany and start working with Democrats once President Donald Trump is out of office. He says, the thing, again, I'll quote him again, it says, the thing that will fundamentally change things is with Donald Trump out of the White House. Not a joke, Biden told reporters at a diner in Concord, New Hampshire. You will see an epiphany occur among many of my Republican friends. It says the comment is the latest demonstration of Biden's effort to clash with Trump directly while also appealing to moderate Republicans. Wow. to the same exact thing Hillary Clinton did, showcasing a broad appeal that could help him win a Democratic nominating contest in which voters are more concerned than usual with candidates' perceived electability. But it also highlights a major rift within a 2020 Democratic primary field in which other candidates, particularly Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, are casting Trump as just a symptom of a GOP and a government now controlled by special interests. Warren, in her campaign kickoff speech in February, said Trump is just the latest and most extreme symptom of what's gone wrong in America. Sanders said in an Iowa rally earlier this year that the stakes of the campaign are not just about defeating Donald Trump. It says the reaction to Biden's comments from the more liberal quarters of the party also illustrated skepticism to his candidacy from progressive activists and voters. Quoting the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, they made a statement. They said the real change isn't coming from epiphanies by Mitch McConnell and other corrupt Republican politicians, but from all of us organizing for change together. Just like his support of NAFTA, a middle ground on the existential climate crisis, this epiphany comment is the latest example of Joe Biden operating in an insider world of yesteryear, and shows that he is our worst foot forward in the general election. Biden acknowledged the tension with other Democrats later Tuesday at a house party in Nashua, New Hampshire. He says, "We're in a situation now, folks, where I don't agree with my friends, and we've got a lot of good people running who say no, that's old-time politics." He further says, "We have to unify this country. Our political system is broken. It's flat broken. And folks, everybody tells me, no, that's naive. That's the old days." Well, if that's the old days, guess what? We're in deep, deep trouble because nothing can happen in this country in consequence without consensus. That's how the system was built. It says... Biden's remarks are also at odds with other comments Biden has made. He, for years, has criticized the GOP in broader terms. "This is not your father's Republican Party" is a go-to line he has used. Yeah, I've heard that. He has used for at least a decade, aiming at Tea Party Republicans in 2010, Mitt Romney in 2012, GOP midterm candidates last year, and Trump-era Republicans as recently as Monday in New Hampshire. But Biden's prediction of a GOP epiphany follows several instances in which he has described Trump as an aberration, as long as his tenure in office is limited to 4 years. That's definitely not true. What Biden is expressing is similar to an unfulfilled hope of former President Barack Obama's first term. And this highlights how Barack Obama says, "When we are successful in this election, the fever may break because there's a tradition in the Republican Party of more common sense," Obama said in 2012 after years of Tea Party opposition. So obviously, basically what Biden is doing, he's just repeating the same sentiment that was put out, by Barack Obama 7 years earlier. So obviously, in my opinion, and many people's opinion, a very ignorant opinion. A very ignorant statement that you just think the Republicans are just going to, agree with everything Democrats or most of what Democrats want to do because it's for the good of the country. So the fact that Biden is just repeating Obama just shows how stupid they both are, honestly. Obama was definitely an idiot back then for thinking that, and for Biden to think it now too. So he's just repeating the same exact thing, dude. That was 7 years ago. Why would you think anything would be different just because of Trump? If anything, the Republicans in many cases are digging their heels. The Republican voters certainly. I don't know about the politicians. Maybe the members of the establishment don't care for Trump as much, but they still support his policies. Even a lot of the Republicans that are kind of so-called anti-Trump, even McCain in many cases. Jeff Flake, I remember, was another one. These guys, they may not like Trump, but they definitely don't disagree with his policies. They go agree with a lot of his policies. So here it says, Democrats critical of Biden's comments say he is ignoring the political realities of the last decade, including his time as vice president, in which GOP leaders sought to block all of Obama's legislative priorities and prevented him from filling a Supreme Court vacancy. That's part of why he has faced criticism for the characterization from veterans of the Obama administration, including the founders and hosts of the popular Pod Save America podcasts. And that's just a guy that's just saying that, how could you believe that this is true? Blah, blah, blah. It says days ago, Mitch McConnell offered a similarly critical take on a future Democratic president's prospects for working with Republicans on Capitol Hill. He says, no matter how they choose to characterize themselves, you can bet whether it is Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, or somebody else, the nominee for president on the Democratic side is going to be on a path to turn America into a socialist country. He said in an interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity, we are not going to let that happen. So that's the end of that article. So, I mean, Biden saying that, first of all, Biden saying that, and then, going and reading the end of, the end of that article where McConnell says basically whether it's Biden, Bernie Sanders, or whoever else, it's, the Democrats are going to push for socialism. So so what happened to that fever breaking? You make that comment about the epiphany and the fever breaking or whatever. I mean, he didn't say it. That's what Obama said. But that whole kind of the epiphany thing, is like, that whole idea of the epiphany thing is completely debunked by the fact that Mitch McConnell still to this day doesn't want to work with Democrats. So I don't even know what is, Biden is just he's such a dunce. He comes off as obviously he's just like that typical, everybody knows him as like Uncle Joe, but he's just like, he's kind of like your idiotic Uncle Joe at like the dinner table on like Thanksgiving. He's just a moron. And he just doesn't seem to understand the real problems that are going on. He just believes that, Republicans are going to just agree with him all of a sudden on things. So that just takes me to, another article. I'm not going to read the entire article, but I just wanted to quote somebody else that is repeating the sentiments of Mitch McConnell is Vice President Joe Biden. I'm sorry, Vice President, not Joe Biden. So Vice President Joe Biden's successor, which is Mike Pence. So Mike Pence is currently the Vice President under Donald Trump, and he is a extremely, extremely right-wing former member of Congress, former governor. I don't think he was in the Senate ever. So he has been all over politics. He was in the Tea Party when the Tea Party was in its kind of in its heyday, essentially, when they first came out, kind of first came out and got recognized. Mike Pence was back in everything they were doing. He was being backed by the Koch brothers, just like the Tea Party, all the other Tea Party politicians were. So he was a part of that movement from the beginning. So look at a quote here from the CNBC article. He says, I think the choice that we face in this country today is the choice between freedom and socialism. Let's see. He says the vice president touted Trump as an advocate for policies including lower taxes and regulations and better fair trade deals. Yeah, right. And then, the rest of the article just kind of details how he's like basically shitting on Biden and saying he doesn't believe that Biden is going to be decent at all, even though the article itself said that Biden is a centrist and he's not. He works with Rogan constantly, so he's not going to push for any kind of socialism like McConnell and in this case Pence believe. Further quoting him, he says, while we hear one of the latest candidates for president say that China doesn't represent a competition of the United States, they're half of our international trade deficit. And forced technology transfers and intellectual property theft are a reality. I think President Trump remains. It says the Trump administration has been locked in what suggests are the final stages of negotiations with China on reshaping the trade relationship between the world's two economies. And Pence is just commenting, saying that he remains hopeful that they can come to a trade deal, but apparently Biden made some comments regarding trade and regarding the fact that China, Biden doesn't believe that China is a big, opponent on when it comes to trade deals and when it comes to like kind of having a trade war, because we're currently having a trade war with China. So apparently, I don't know, Biden was kind of poo-pooing that and saying that it doesn't really exist. Obviously that's untrue, and again, there's more proof that Biden is an idiot, but also, buttressing the point that just like Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence doesn't believe the Democrats are going to be in their mind fair or in their mind working with them. They're just going to think that they're all socialists and they're all communists and they're all left wingers and all this other stuff. And that, anybody that even dares to push for like even a cent of a tax hike, they're going to call them a socialist, and they're call them all these different stupid ass political labels. Well, not stupid ass political labels, but like baseless political labels that are not really. They're not really like. That's not really true of that person. So if you want to see an actual socialist or communist, you're definitely not going to be looking at Democrats. They're never going to get anywhere close to that, let alone the fact that Obama was never even close to that, and they still call him that. So, yeah, this just shows that Biden is naive and ridiculous, and he just doesn't get it. And the fact that you see pundits like Joe Scarborough and all these morons, scoffing at the idea, like, how dare you, want to work with the Republicans? Yeah, because the Republicans want to screw us over, just like in many cases Joe Biden wants to screw us over. But somehow Joe Biden thinks he knows better. These pundits, these, people in the establishment think they know better. They think everything is just going to be, it's going to be rainbows and unicorns when Joe Biden becomes president, and Republicans are going to want to work with him all of a sudden. So it's ridiculous, and I can't stand the kind of attitude these people have whenever we oppose what they want to do, which is just the same shit as usual. The business as usual.